And at the time, I remember being like, if my life's greatest work is dancing around in spandex and like making a music video, a parody music video, that is a sad existence. But now, 7 years later, looking back, I'm like, you know what? I think maybe that might be my life's greatest work.
Welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast. I'm Matthew Piaro, and with me is Matt Hansen. Welcome, Matt.
So pleasure to be here.
So pleasure to be here. You are happy to be here, eh?
You know, what can I say? It's just my favorite time of the 2 weeks.
Well, we have actually had a bit of a break. We took most of August off, but we're back full swing in this episode. Oh, wait, how was your break?
It was good. I got a lot of stuff done.
Did you? Because you weren't being interrupted by podcast appearances?
Yeah, this podcast is kind of a time suck, I won't lie.
Oh, wow. Well,
I got to prepare 3 minutes before.
Yep.
And then talk to you, and then
Yep.
get yelled at by you. And
We cut that part out, though.
oh, readers don't know that part.
Listeners, we call them.
Oh, right, because we're not, they can't. Gotcha.
You're like a kid coming back to school, spent, the summer away, didn't touch the books and trying to remember some stuff. This is a podcast. And in this episode, the feature interview is with Micayla Gatto. I spoke with the freerider, multiple national downhill champion. She's also an artist and a filmmaker. Most will recall her video, For the Girls. It's based around Kendrick Lamar's Humble. The video won Crankwork's Dirt Diaries in 2017. One of the big ideas in this interview that I explore with Gatto is the changes in women's gravity disciplines and possibly, most likely, her influence on these changes. And following that interview, I have a few words from Derek G. as he looks ahead to the Grand Prix Cycliste de Québec et de Montréal. But before all that, before the chat with Micayla Gatto and our Grand Prix preview, Matt, you had a terrible last work day of August, didn't you?
It was very annoying. I have stuff to do, and Mike Woods goes out and wins the Vuelta in his national championship jersey. Thanks, buddy. Cool.
He won stage 13 of the Vuelta, yes?
Stage 13, yeah, not the whole thing. Yeah, come on. Just one stage, but that's still a pain. And then Bella has the gall to go out and become another world champion, which don't even get me started. That's one of two over the weekend.
Hold on. That's Isabella Holmgren. And what was the championship that she won there?
Short track.
At Worlds, yes, in Andorra.
Yeah.
Go on.
And then BTW, she also wins on Sunday in the cross country. Her sister was third. Raphael Carrier was second.
Stop. Slow down. I know it was so traumatic for you, but we got to take listeners through this. Ava, her sister, was third in the short track Worlds race. Yeah. Emily Johnston, fourth. Another Canuck is in there. This is still August 30th. And then, sorry, you were saying the junior women's race. What happened there?
Raphael Carrier, she decided to get silver.
She decided?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the Paralympics, Keely Shaw and Alexander Hayward, they got some medals too. And it was a lot,
Hold on. Yes, Keely Shaw was bronze in the women's C4 3,000 meter individual pursuit, and Alexander Hayward men's C3 3,000 meter individual pursuit. That's over at the Paralympics.
And the Fridays are my day to kind of wind things down early, like content, whatever, just kind of put up some lackluster stuff and just take it easy. And these people...
You're waiting for beer o'clock.
Yeah. And then these, let me tell you something. Why don't you try and be 65th at the World Championships? Like, mediocrity is good, okay? No one wrote about me. It was a lot easier. But these people have to go out and win everything. Anyway, it was a lot. And thanks, everyone. No, I'm kidding. Of course, it was incredible. It was rapid fire. It was wild. I was like, reading out so much stuff.
It was a wild day. It was all hands on deck. You and Terry and a social media editor, Nikita, and we were all just trying to coordinate this barrage of success on August 30th.
It was, it was a pretty wild day. I mean, they sewed some pretty good results up. So that was pretty cool. I mean, also, the men's under 23 had some good top 10s. I mean, it was just like a full day.
And then, yes, as you mentioned, September 1st, Isabella Holmgren won the XCO, Cross Country Olympic World Championships in under 23. Emily Johnston was third. So this is Isabella Holmgren's fourth World Championship.
And I got to say, it was most impressive. I mean, obviously winning the race is impressive, but the fact that she was fifth in the elites is like, that's pretty good. Pretty good.
So, I'm sorry to hear that you had to do so much work, but that was great.
Yeah, great.
All right, Matt, I'd like to introduce Micayla Gatto a bit further. I spoke with her not too long ago. She was actually in her truck at a boatyard about to work on her family's sailboat. And I hadn't realized that sailing was an important part of her childhood. And in this interview, she talks about how she plans to combine sailing and mountain biking. Go figure, eh? Also, Gatto is a tattoo artist in training. It all fits. It sounds random, but it all fits in the Micayla Gatto sphere of mountain biking and art and creativity. There's just so many facets to this rider. And of course, we discuss For the Girls. She is so well known for that video that pokes fun at, while also seriously critiquing how women are portrayed and treated within mountain biking. I was curious what she thought of its influence on her as well as on mountain biking itself. So here is my talk with Micayla Gatto. Micayla Gatto, welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast.
Thank you.
This summer, you posted a video to your YouTube channel. It's called Micayla Gatto Freeride. It features lots of footage of you riding lines that make a viewer's palms start to sweat or heart start to race, at least a viewer like me, because these lines look terrifying. The soundtrack to the video is Background by Wolfmother. Tell me about that choice. Is there a connection between shredding lines and shredding guitars? I mean, beyond the word shredding?
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment on the video. I actually edited it myself, which was one of the first videos I've actually tried to compile from various amounts of footage collected over the last year or so. Shredding the guitar. I mean, I think there is a direct correlation of free riding and music and art and just being creative in general. I think everything in that scope takes a creative mind, and it takes, thinking outside the box. It takes maybe living an alternative lifestyle. But that song in particular, I took from one of the New World Disorder movies that I was so inspired by growing up. They kind of shaped who I am as a rider, and the soundtracks to those New World Disorder movies just brings me back to this place of nostalgia as like a 15-year-old girl, just like so amped on riding and free ride and watching like Wade Simmons do a crazy road gap and Thomas Vanderham and all those guys. So it was my Rampage application video. So I thought that there isn't really a more fitting soundtrack than Wolfmother and one from a New World Disorder movie for my first application video to Red Bull Rampage. And as many of you probably already know, it's the first year women are invited to Rampage. So I thought it just was like a nice kind of full circle moment for me.
Your answer just right there touched on so many things so many threads that I want to follow. Maybe you could tell me or tell us a little bit more about your personal relationship to video and free ride. And you mentioned the wider connections going all the way back to New World Disorder, but how about you and video and free ride and these connections?
Well, I think as an artist, I've always been drawn to self-expression through creative media outlets. So, as a kid, I grew up without TV, but when I started bike racing, we would go to hotels and I would see music videos and I was just glued. I absolutely loved the creativity from the music to the visuals with the song and everything like that. And then you just add mountain biking in there and, finally getting to watch Red Bull Rampage on VHS and DVD and then all the New World Disorder movies. It just, everything's to music and everything fits so well with with the music that is just like my happy place. It's just watching people shred. And I think freeride is like, because there's no results except for judged event like Rampage, aside from that, there is no way to really like, the only way to show the world your abilities as a freerider is through video and media. And I think creativity, media, video, content, and freeride have always gone hand in hand. I mean, if you're not standing right there, a lot of these places are really remote. So like, there's no way anyone could ever see it unless you're documenting it and then sharing it with the world.
That's really interesting. But yeah, freeride is essentially, it needs video, or they, like you said, they grew up hand in hand. They're part and parcel as a package. And I like that idea. It's like there's no results sheet that you could look at later to see who won the race, like a road stage or even a cross country race. So there's no other record, or maybe sometimes that's the only record is video.
Yeah, and because it's not like at a race, you have photographers and videographers and stuff, documenting the race, putting it online, putting it in the magazines and the race results and all that stuff. But as a freerider, you don't show up to a ski slope in the backcountry and have a slew of photographers there waiting to take photos of you. You have to like build relationships with photographers that not only can capture what you're riding, but also reflect your personality as a rider. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of logistics, and being able to work closely with creatives like that, it's like you need to find people that, you would want to essentially share a tent with in the backcountry for a week. And yeah, so I don't think people talk enough about that important relationship between videographer and rider when it comes to freeride and diggers.
Right. I want to get into that too a little later, but shots in the video reminded me of the cliffs of Utah. And as you mentioned, this video was your application to Rampage. That is happening in October. And as you mentioned, there will be the first women's lineup going to that Rampage. You're on the alternates list. How do you feel about that?
I'm ecstatic. I'm super happy. I feel like rewinding back a little bit, racing downhill World Cups for so long, crashing, getting a head injury, having to stop racing World Cups, switching to making video and media content, doing more adventure riding with Diamondback. They actually didn't make a downhill bike. So for the last 7 years that I was on Diamondback, I wasn't really able to ride any downhill and focused more on storytelling and adventure riding, content creation. And then recently, last year, I switched and am now sponsored by YT. And it's the first time I've really been able to capture myself riding a downhill bike and actually focusing on riding my downhill bike on proper freeride lines in, 7 years or so. So to be on that alternate list after only kind of being back on a downhill bike the last few years consistently, I'm super proud. And I think it is the recognition and the little carrot dangling in front of me that I need to keep me motivated. And, it's like that pat on the back, like, hey, we see you, you're doing the right thing, keep working hard. And this is totally a tangible goal. I feel really grateful to be, in that top 12 freeride women in the world, big mountain freeride women in the world that are on that radar for Rampage.
It's kind of no surprise to me because you were at the first Red Bull formation back in 2019.
Yes.
That was Red Bull's sort of first foray, I guess, shall we call it, into bringing women into the Rampage sphere. But like, how has your relationship with Rampage evolved or changed since 2019?
It's hard to answer because I guess my relationship with Rampage started when I was just a kid. And always looking up to those riders, always being so inspired by all the men that rode that terrain and competed in Rampage. A lot of them are good friends of mine, and never having that as an option, it's like you want to do it, but when you don't have the opportunity, you're sort of like, okay, well, I guess I'll focus my efforts into racing and something else. And so when formation came to fruition, it was like, oh, wow, finally, like we're allowed to like be out here and dig and ride. And it's not saying that we couldn't be there before, but I think when there's no, you know, women weren't being recognized for riding that kind of stuff, and there's not really any lucrative outlet for it. It's like you only have so much time in the day, and like at the end of the day I got to eat and pay rent, so I'm going to focus on doing what I love but also like doing what pays, and that was just never an option. So to have formation be created, it was an amazing opportunity to get us out there, to get us building out there and riding that terrain. And yeah, and then having it turn into a women's category at Rampage, it's just absolutely surreal. And I think it's going to change the pathway of career of a lot of up and coming freeriders as well. Because I think women have been focusing a little more on the jumps and the tricks because that's what's been accessible to us. But now that there's this big mountain aspect to it, I think we might see more women hitting like big mountain lines and focusing a little bit more on that. At least I hope so, because that's my favorite type of riding.
At Rampage, riders create their lines and decide how to approach them. Are there links between your creative artistic side with paint or film or whatever and with the performance of freeride, like the actual setting up, a line in Utah kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there is a direct correlation between, having a creative mind and creating lines on your bike, freeride lines. I also think the combination of my creative mind as an artist, aesthetically, I think I can look at a hillside and kind of understand what will look good. And this is just experience as well with being filmed. And I am passionate about photography as well. So it's like aesthetically knowing what's going to look good for media, but then also line choice, I think mostly comes from my experience of racing World Cups for 9 years.
That's downhill World Cups.
Yeah, downhill World Cups. I can, look at slope and find a line through it. And just growing up on the North Shore, there's a lot of jank, a lot of roots, a lot of rocks. And so I think I've learned from an early age how to like look at something that looks just like a jumbled mess that a lot of people would just be like, oh my God, that looks really intimidating. And then finding, the flat rocks in between the roots that I could like bump off of and like just spotting a line. So I think that combination, can't hurt, right?
Not at all. In March of this year at Crankworks Rotorua, there was the first women's FMBA Slopestyle World Championship event. Along with Rampage, it's been a big year of firsts. And we've looked at the progression of the Red Bull event, but looking at the broader picture, why do you think are we seeing these firsts for women in 2024?
I think it's just gotten to a point where you can't ignore the level of performance and the volume of women who are now performing at an elite level. And, I think it's gotten to a point where it would have almost been rude not to, I think.
Or maybe looked dumb if it wasn't there.
Yeah, it's just gotten to a point where before there was the excuses of like, oh, well, there's not enough women. There's only like 5 women in the world that are hitting stuff like this. Or like, oh, we don't see the interest, or like, we need the proof. And it sucks that it had to take, this much time and this much proof and this much effort to get recognized. But I think 2023, without having formation, but also having no women's field at Red Bull, and there seeming to be just a stagnancy in the slopestyle scene of like, women were starting to compete on smaller stages with slopestyle, improving themselves, but still didn't have that Crankworks FMB World Tour. It was just kind of a no-brainer. I think whoever's in charge, I think, was like, oh man, if we don't make a women's category, people are going to be pissed. Because, there's only 8 women slotted in for Rampage this year, but I could think of off the top of my head 14 or 15 women that would easily be able to manage that terrain and do a top to bottom run. And I think those are the type of numbers that Red Bull was waiting to see, where there's like a good field of women. So it's not just one or two.
Yeah, it did strike me though that there are 18 men at Rampage and only 8 women. And you said there are more women who could line up there.
Yeah, I think it's like anything. You have to start small. I don't know the nuances of creating an event like Rampage. I can't imagine the logistics and the liability and the TV time and the budget and all of these things that go into making such a massive event like Rampage. I wasn't expecting there to be as many women as men the first year because, the girls have never done it. The event's never done it. It's like we're getting our toes wet. We're seeing how we do. We're figuring out like the women have a separate space than the men, like the men's course or zone. Yeah, the men's zone and women's zone. Women's zone is right beside the men's zone. And it's like, okay, well, what does that look like because of room and riders? And I have no idea what their thought is, but I trust H5 Events. I trust Todd Barber and Red Bull to, be making the accurate steps necessary to having this longevity of a women's category, because you want the first year to be positive and impactful and successful. And I think there's 8 women that are like absolutely guaranteed to succeed, or I guess 12 because of the 4 alternates. But I think, yeah, with a big event like that, that's so dangerous for the riders, it's probably comes down to like a liability thing. And they just want to make sure that the women look good and, we're represented by the best of the best. And it'll just encourage more budget and more opportunity for growth moving forward.
Do you see work you've done contributing to these changes, these big developments in women's mountain biking? How much do you want to take credit for? And don't be humble.
I was going to say like, oh, wow, that's like, you're asking me to just...
Kinda.
It's hard. It's hard because I'm just me and I've always just done what I loved and I've never really seen it as being an option to do anything else. I love people. I love expressing myself. I love inspiring people. I love trying to improve the climate of women in sport whenever I can. I think growing up, there wasn't very many of us. It was very hard. Didn't make a dime when I was racing World Cups for 9 years. I worked 3 jobs and I think, we see a huge shift in that. We see the younger girls coming up that are 16 years old getting full sponsorships and media budgets and things like that. So, I mean, the change is undeniable. How much, I have made an impact, I don't know. I mean, I've had a couple people name their babies after me, so I got to be doing something right. That's a pretty big honor, I would say, or I just have a cool name. And, I think Ferta Girls had a really big impact. It was kind of a right place, right time situation. Yeah, I mean, every once in a while I'll get a nice DM on the old Instagram and have somebody say like, hey, thanks so much for what you've done for the industry. And like, I look up to you and like really inspired by what you do. And that always feels really good. But I think it's taken Vero Sandler, Casey Brown, me, Katie Holden, even earlier days like Katrina Strand and Claire Bouchard, like Rachel Atherton, like it's taken all of us women constantly fighting for, what we feel we deserve and constantly working to better ourselves in the sport as a collective whole to make the difference that we see today. And so I don't think I can, take credit for just one singular thing. If I were to take credit for one singular thing, I would say maybe encouraging people to take themselves a little less seriously, have a little bit of humor. It's okay to be, an artist and an athlete and follow your dreams in a multitude of arenas than just just being an athlete and a mountain biker. I think that's kind of what I advocate for the most, is sort of like self-acceptance, get out there, love yourself, love others, and be creative in whatever, be successful in whatever way that looks like for you, and not really listening to what the society norms are. So I like to think maybe I've made an impact that way, but who knows?
it's we can leave the rest of that up to your biographer or whatever to figure that out. I'm glad you listed those other women, because that's actually one of my other questions I had. Who else has done complementary work that you might want our listeners to know about? And you shared those names, and I appreciate that too.
I don't think there's a woman in the sport that hasn't helped, like we're all fighting for the same thing. And it is that like volume that makes an impact. Like I said before, I guess when I was really young, the first successful women in the sports like Anne-Caroline Chausson and Elodie Brown and Leslie Tomlinson and people like that who were really fighting for women to get recognized. Missy Giove, I think they were kind of the leaders. And then kind of moving into when I was growing up, I mean, I've been doing this sport since the early 2000s, which now makes me old. There wasn't many girls my age. And then, Casey Brown came onto the scene. Vero Sandler kind of found her niche from, we were traveling together, racing World Cups, and I don't think that was really her vibe. So then she just started, hitting jumps in her backyard and documenting it. And when she started, it wasn't anything crazy. And then she just documented her progression. And I think documenting the failures and the repeat run-ins of trying the same trick over and over again, I think that was extremely inspiring for a lot of women. And watching her progression, I mean, I was super inspired by it. And now she's, hosting her own events, building entire bike parks in her backyard with her boyfriend, and, inviting all the girls over to come shred. And so, like her, Casey Brown created Dark Horse as well and invited a bunch of girls. So it's like, not only are these women now, doing it for themselves and pushing their own limits and being inspiring in that way, it's now grown so that the industry is supporting them to create events to then invite more women, which will push them. And then it just grows the sport. But I'd say those are kind of the industry changers. Katie Holden's done a ton of work too. She created Formation, and I think she's done a lot of selfless endeavors to get more women into the sport and be more inclusive to marginalized groups. And I know she had a big help in the Grow Cycling Foundation with Elliot Jackson, and just an overall advocate for getting more people on bikes. And her adventure riding and stuff like that was always really inspirational to me too.
Micayla Gatto, last year you joined YT Mob in 2023. Tell me how that connection came about.
So I guess we'll start back when I was on Diamondback, and I mentioned before they didn't really make a downhill bike. I rode in Formation in 2019 on like an old, I don't even know what year it was, Diamondback freeride bike. And it was absolutely terrifying because it was just sitting in my garage with no wheels on it for probably like 3 years, 4 years or something. And I was like, well, I got invited to Formation, and I was like, well, better drag this thing out of the cobwebs. And I hopped on it, and it was a used old freeride bike. So it sounded like a shopping cart, and rode like one too a little bit. And Diamondback recognized that, and we're like, okay, we need to, we understand that this freeride thing is important to you. And so we want to buy you a downhill bike from your company of choice, because we don't make downhill bikes anymore. And I was like, okay. And they're like, you can choose any bike and we'll buy it for you, which was incredible, under the premise that I would black out the frame and not, obviously show the other brand. And I picked a YT2S. And so that was kind of the first foot in the door with YT. And the reason why I picked them is I just heard really good things about them. Aggie Graham Agassi and Ace Hayden and Brett Tippie, I think, were all riding for YT, which are all local BC boys that I've always looked up to. And I love their riding style. And it's like, well, if it's good enough for Aggie, then it's good enough for me kind of thing. And just honestly, the marketing that they do is really incredible. The brand identity that they have and like the graphics that they would use in their advertisements, you could just see there was a lot of thoughtful creativity and branding, and it was all this kind of like tattoo-esque, like cool, kind of dark, but like gnarly graphics of like wolf heads and stuff. And I was really attracted to that. I'm like, damn, I want to be cool like that. And it was always just sort of a bit more free ride, a bit more loose, a bit more lifestyle than, some of the other companies where it's very buttoned up and not much room for self-expression. And I felt like YT really celebrated their riders' personalities, and everyone on the team seemed to have big personalities and were accepted for those. And so, yeah, it was just a really attractive company to me. And then, after Diamondback kind of fell on some hard times and dropped their whole athlete roster, I was like, all right, well, this is an opportunity for me. Do I want to, ride because I had a few offers from other companies, and it was kind of like, do I want to ride for a company that doesn't make a downhill bike, but might pay me a little bit more money? Or do I want to ride for a company that, I'm really excited about the bikes. They have every bike you could possibly imagine. So yeah, just like the whole brand identity of YT. And then it just kind of seemed fluid. Like I went to one of their parties at Crankworks and met a bunch of the president of the North American distribution and, a few of the staff members. And I obviously knew Aggie and Ace and stuff. And it just felt like a good fit. And I was kind of like, you know what? I don't really care what kind of offers I get. This is the company I want to ride for. And I kind of just didn't really take no for an answer.
You mentioned the term tattooey, which sort of the YT vibe in there. But I understand there's more going on with tattoos and YT and you. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, as an artist, growing up as an artist, went to university for art. But I guess a little known fact about me in my younger years is I've always, always dreamt of being a tattoo artist. And in high school, or just out of high school, I was like, I've been designing tattoos since I was like 13. I have like all of these drawings. I have no idea where they are, if I still have them, but let's just say I'm really glad I didn't get any of those ones, like big angel wings down my back and stuff. But I would tattoo my friends with Sharpies, and I would like draw up flash sheets for, I would dream of like getting all these tattoos and would draw up tattoos for my friends, just like make believe ones. And then after high school, I went to a bunch of tattoo shops along Granville Street in Vancouver, which is, was a pretty seedy area. It's where all the nightclubs are and, piercing tattoo places. And I guess that would be 2008 kind of. And so tattooing was still kind of rough around the edges. And this little 18-year-old girl walking into these shops being like, hi, I was just wondering, like, I want to apprentice. And they're essentially just like, get out of here, kid. And on and off since then, I've kind of like always been intrigued by it, always asked questions, always wanted to get involved, but not really knowing the first steps. And being on YT last year, my boss, Jimmy, we went to Sedona Mountain Bike Festival, and he said, hey, yeah, my good buddy Angel Lopez is a tattoo artist, and I've told him he should come on out. And so if you guys want tattoos, he's going to come to the house, the Airbnb, and maybe you guys can get some flash or something. And I was like, no way. And I already had tattoos from friends and stuff, but I was pretty excited to meet Angel and just started asking him a ton of questions, as I do whenever I'm getting tattooed. And he offered me an apprenticeship. And he was like, you're asking the right questions. I can tell that tattooing is actually something you're interested in. You're an artist already. I can tell that you don't just want this to be for clout or a cool party trick. So YT hooked me up with my tattoo apprenticeship, essentially. Pretty darn cool.
That is not a link I would have expected. That's so interesting. But as you tell that story, it all makes sense, of course. It all seems to link up.
Yeah. I think a lot of the YT guys are pretty heavily tattooed, and being a more kind of creative company, I think the two go hand in hand with freeride tattoos. Like, so many of the freeride guys are pretty covered, and it's all that adrenaline seeking mentality, you know?
Around 7 years ago, you released For the Girls, and you mentioned that video clip a bit earlier in our conversation. It not only won Crankwork's Dirt Diaries, but it was a viral sensation. How has your relationship with that work changed in the past 7 years? And I guess what I mean by that is, did you feel maybe differently about it, compared with right away, and then about 4 years after its release, and then up to today? Was there an evolution in your relationship with it?
With the video or with the messaging, or?
Let's say with the reception of the video.
Well, I think the video was always fairly well received.
But I guess what I'm wondering, is it like a hit song that an artist is like, oh, I got to play this again at a concert? Or is it still something that you are deeply connected to and are happy to talk about it in numerous interviews like you're doing now?
Well, I think definitely was a huge milestone in my career. It definitely got me put on the map as a creative in the mountain bike space. I had filmed a Red Bull video the year prior, that where I'm riding through my artwork, but it got released after For the Girls. So For the Girls was the first time I'd ever actually done a full-length video project featuring myself. So that video, it means a lot to me on a lot of different levels. It was the first time I really expressed my frustrations with being a female in the sport. And I think it was the first time really any female had really expressed their frustrations in this sort of palatable way for the general public, in a kind of comedic way. So yeah, I mean, I'm always going to be proud of it. I'll listen to it every once in a while, or, my best friends, usually when they introduce me to someone and they as best friends do, we brag about each other, and For the Girls almost inevitably always comes up because I think it's something everyone can enjoy watching, not just mountain bikers. And I think women of all sports can relate to. So they usually pull it up and make them watch it. And then everyone's like, oh my God, that's you. And then it's this whole thing. And I'm always like, yeah, haha, like try and brush it off. But I'm actually really proud. But I listened to the song, and it does make me cringe a little bit because, like you said, it has been 7 years, and I'm like, oh man, I could have rapped way better, and I just kind of sound really choppy, and I wish I could redo it and do a better job. But that's also just the perfectionist in me. So yeah, I think I'll always be proud of it. It'll always be this milestone in my career that really, made an impact. And I do remember at the time, I wasn't initially super proud. I was scared about putting myself out there because no women had really done that in that kind of way, or the women that had spoken out about these issues were greeted with a lot of backlash and a lot of oh, she's just bitter, or oh, she's a bitch, or whatever, women voicing their opinions was never really respected. But For the Girls came out right around the time of the Me Too movement. So suddenly women's voices were being heard. So it was just right place, right time. But initially I was really scared, and then saw the impact it was having. It was all a bit surreal. And then I remember specifically, I think it was Martin Soderstrom or Emil Johansson. I can't remember who it was. I think it was one of the Swedes. Big names. And they were like, how does it feel to, have accomplished your life's greatest work? And at the time, I remember being like, if my life's greatest work is dancing around in spandex and making a music video, a parody music video, that is a sad existence. But now, 7 years later, looking back, I'm like, you know what? I think maybe that might be my life's greatest work. Because I think it kind of sank in the impact it's had, and kind of the snowball effect of you were saying earlier, how have you contributed to this like change and growth of women in cycling. And I think, that was a bit of a catalyst. And I think from that point onwards, things really took off. And like how much that video was responsible for that, I don't know. But I think there is sort of like a correlation to that. So yeah, I think I'll always be proud of it.
How does the fear that you experienced before the release of that video, how does that compare with, I don't know, are you afraid when you send it off a cliff? Or is one scarier than the other? Yeah?
Absolutely. I think there is a difference between fear of self-expression and not being received by your peers versus a fear of injury. Both are a fear of consequence, but the fear of not being accepted and the fear of cancel culture wasn't really a thing when For the Girls came out. So I couldn't really put it into those words, but I guess it's just like a fear of not being accepted, I think sometimes can be greater than a fear of getting injured. I feel like when you're about to send it off a cliff on your bike, you're in control to some extent of the outcome. You could walk away if you want. You could be successful, or if you get injured, it's your problem. No one else is going to judge you on that. It's just like, it's all for yourself. Whereas putting your opinion out there for the world to judge, the result is, I think, more out of your control because you don't know how other people are going to receive it. But it's a different type of fear. But yeah, every single rider feels fear. I think it's a misconception that, when people see us riding these big free ride lines, they're like, wow, you're so fearless. It's like, no, I'm scared of shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but
it's accurate though.
Yeah. And it's like every other rider that you talk to, they're terrified. I don't think there's one person standing at the top of the Red Bull Rampage line on competition day that isn't scared. I think when you're a professional free rider, you just get better at managing that fear and almost turning that fear into excitement rather than anxiety. Yeah, just knowing it's just risk management and fear management, but the fear never goes away. The jumps just get bigger.
You mentioned the term cancel culture didn't really exist when the video came out, but also a term that I want to bring up that didn't really exist, at least not as we know it today at that time, is the word influencer. What do you think of the idea, or the term, let's say, of influencer?
I personally don't like being called an influencer because I think the word has a negative connotation. When I think of influencer, I think of maybe someone that would represent products that they don't necessarily morally connect to, but just want to make a quick buck, and almost over embellishing a lifestyle to get likes and views and have clickbait, and not necessarily making authentic connections with their community, but more just trying to sell stuff and leverage their following by selling stuff to a certain demographic. And that is something I actually try and avoid. The companies that I represent are companies I truly believe in and have a good relationship with and I'm truly excited about. Ford Bronco is a good example. It's like, yeah, we have monthly deliverables that we have to put on our Instagram, and sometimes it can feel challenging to sound authentic, but this vehicle has given me so many opportunities. I've grown up camping. I love the outdoors. I love off-roading. I had a 97 4Runner that I built up before I got the Bronco. I was actually trying to build a vintage Bronco up, and then COVID hit. And then I just happened to get an email asking if I wanted to be a Bronco ambassador. So it's like, for me, like the Bronco is, I post a lot about it, but it's because I'm actually genuinely so impressed with this vehicle. And it's gotten me to places in the outdoors that were maybe a little inaccessible before. It's allowed me to drive to Utah 3 times a year without being stressed that I'm going to break down on the side of the road. And so I want to share that with people, and I want people to be hyped because I'm hyped. Whereas I feel like the word influencer is more like, well, this company's paying me X amount of dollars to post, so I'm going to do it even though, I don't actually believe in this product.
To pick up on some of the threads I think I'm hearing is like there's this idea of authenticity versus inauthenticity. And I feel like as you see the word influencer, they're not using things authentically. Meanwhile, your Bronco, your YT downhill bike, you are actually using them as they are meant to be used.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, that's the difference between an influencer and a sponsored athlete. So all the companies I'm sponsored by help me be a better athlete. Like the Bronco allows me to access zones that I can go ride on my bike live remotely in my rooftop tent so I can go and ride my bike. And it allows me to do that. And I think that's where being a sponsored athlete, it's like your sponsors help you be a better athlete. So that's how I identify. And obviously with that, hopefully you influence and inspire people to want to live the life that you're living because, I'm pretty freaking stoked on my life. And I would love for people to, be as excited as I am about my car and be as happy as I am about shredding some scree on a bike that feels awesome. And so, yeah, I guess that's the difference to me.
I'm getting that the athleticism part is key to all of this, the actual on-bike skills.
Yeah, I think, it's a bit of a sore point for me when people, and I maybe I've done it a bit to myself. I can be a little scattered, the old ADHD grabs a hold sometimes and the hobbies get a little all over the place. And sometimes I post stuff that I'm like, oh, okay, they probably don't care about this. But I am a very serious athlete and I take what I do extremely seriously, even though it might come across as not. And so when I feel like I'm called an influencer versus an athlete, it's hurtful because it's like, man, I've been going to the gym since I was 14 for this sport. And I've been, racing bikes since I was 13, raced World Cup, downhill World Cups, got, World Cup medals, World Championship medals as a junior, raced Crankworks, got multiple, would podium at Crankworks all the time. And so it's just like people that only know me from Furta Girls and moving forward, I think don't realize sometimes where I've come from. And, I have moved into the media side of things more heavily in the last 10 years. But before that, I was just an athlete. And so, yeah, it's always a little triggering when someone calls me an influencer and not an athlete.
Tell me about sailing and riding, and can you combine these two passions of yours?
Yeah. So before riding, there was sailing.
Okay.
And I grew up sailing. I grew up living on my family sailboat every summer from when I was about 3 years old until riding took over. I raced sailboats. My brother raced sailboats. My dad races sailboats. And my dad's, raced across the Atlantic, delivered boats to Hawaii, sailed to Alaska, sailed a family to French Polynesia. He has so many stories. And he is probably my biggest inspiration for adventure and living an adventurous life. And as a child, I just wanted to follow in his footsteps and be an Olympic sailor and sail boats across all the oceans. And then I found mountain biking, and that was accidentally very successful. And now I'm at a point where, because my focus is on freeride and getting to remote places and documenting life in an inspiring way, I have kind of taken a new interest back. I've had the time to come back to my roots a little bit, and I'm helping my dad refurbish our sailboat. And the plan is to sail it starting off kind of more local, Powell River, Squamish, things like that, Hornby Island, and integrating the sail and ride, kind of combining two more of my passions, and sailing to a remote place, getting off and riding my bike, shredding down a mountain and sleeping on the boat. And I have my biggest goal, I would say, with that would be to sail to Alaska and then ride some big mountain lines in Alaska, just live on the boat for a month and yeah, just try and film and shred some big stuff.
That sounds pretty cool. That sounds wicked. My final question. Recently, I was speaking with a female DH and enduro rider from BC. I'm not saying her name because this was kind of off the record, so I don't want to say her name, but she's about 16 years younger than you. And I told her I'd be interviewing you. And I asked this rider what she would ask you if she could interview you. And she said, I don't know. She's such a legend. Saying you were such a legend. So this, I think, picks up on some threads I was exploring earlier. But how does it feel to be, or how do you feel about the term legend now?
I mean, so that term towards me has been thrown around a little bit this year, which is the first time I've ever been referred to as a legend, which tells me two things. I've made an impact, hopefully a positive impact on the sport, and I'm respected for the hard work that I've done in the last almost 20 years of riding. So that feels amazing. Actually, more than 20 years. Holy smokes. And secondly, it makes me feel old because you don't get legend status unless you've been doing this for a while. But I have been doing this for a while. And, just like the gray hairs on my head, I'm just learning to accept the growth and transformation of my life and my career. Just because I've gone from maybe Grom to legend doesn't mean it's any less impactful or any less celebrated, I would say. So I guess being referred to as a legend, I think it's funny because I am still that 16-year-old figuring life out, just doing what she loves, trying to make it in this world. And I still feel like that. So me, legendary? Oh God. Like I better do something cool so that people, if people are looking up to me, I better
keep on being legendary, if you will.
Yeah, or at least try. Like I feel like I'm not legendary, so I'm like, well, dang. If this is what you're looking up to, I better try harder. But I think that's just being, we're all just kids in adult bodies trying to feel accepted and accomplished, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think I'm always going to be feeling like I'm not doing enough, or that I need to do more, or that I'm, just me, nothing special. I am who I am. I live with myself every day, and I can be annoying as hell sometimes. So yeah, just gotta keep on keeping on and make sure that maybe if I meet this girl one day, or if I know her, she'll walk away going, yeah, she's a legend, not like, oh, peg that one wrong. It's just so surreal to me. It's so funny.
It must be, yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time and your really incredibly thoughtful answers. And I'm going to keep an eye out for the sailing and riding projects. That does sound pretty awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Matt, that was my talk with Micayla Gatto. Legend? Tentative legend, maybe? That is quite the handle. I know it gets thrown around a lot. That everything can be legend. Like that soup I had the other day was legend. But in this case, I think it's a fair description of Micayla Gatto. And it was great to talk to her. So she's so insightful and funny. Now we're gonna change gears a bit. One of the biggest events, or let's say two biggest races in road cycling in Canada, are coming up in a week. Le Grand Prix Cycliste de Québec and Montreal. See what I did there?
Did, yeah. Pierre Trudeau would be so happy.
Recently, the event, the Grand Prix, they held a press conference with Derek G. Everyone knows him. Stage winner at the Dauphiné, wore the yellow jersey there, finished third in the GC at the Dauphiné. He rode to an impressive 9th overall at the Tour de France. And last year was his first time racing the GPs. These two races were instrumental in getting him interested in cycling. And here are some of his thoughts from that press conference.
Hey, Derek.
last year was the first year racing the Quebec races. Is there anything you learned from those races that will change how you approach them this year?
For sure. I think honestly, just knowing the circuits, obviously you know them as a spectator, but it's completely different to race them. And the biggest thing I found was just how attritional they truly are, because you see, on TV, the race kicks off 2 laps to go sometimes. And you think, oh, well, it's 2 laps of racing, but it's so hard and it just wears you down lap after lap, especially knowing the circuits well, knowing where you can conserve energy. I think you saw that really well with some of the great riders in the past, like Sagan, where you'd see him, sagging the climbs at the start and just slipping back and through the peloton and conserving energy. And it's tough to understand how clever a rider you have to be able to do that well. And it makes all the difference in the final. I think last year, especially, I was wasting energy left, right, and center. Mike was chatting with me later and he was just saying, like, you could save so much throughout the race, just knowing the course, knowing, where the key points are and yeah, just trying to have as much energy left for when the actual, the race really, really kicks off.
So could you say Montreal is the course that suits you better than Quebec? And if so, why?
100%. And I'm not sure. I actually think Quebec doesn't suit me at all. It's super punchy. It's just a steep wall over and over. So luckily our team is actually full of riders who are really, really good at that kind of an effort, whether it's Corbin or Stevie. And Montreal definitely suits me more. It's a longer effort, but it's also more, it's a more attritional race throughout the day. So, it's still a little short for me. I think I definitely do better on 20+ minute efforts, and Montreal isn't quite that long. It's still actually quite a punchy effort, but what helps is that the day is so hard all day in Montreal. So yeah, I mean, neither course is perfect for, I think, the kind of rider that I'm learning that I am. Like just physically what suits me best, but for sure Montreal is a lot closer.
That was Derek G speaking about the upcoming races in Quebec City and Montreal. Also in that press conference was Joseph Lemar. He is the general director of Le Grand Prix, and he drew our attention to a change in the Montreal race. Have you heard of this change, Matt?
It's longer.
Opposite.
It's shorter.
There you go. You knew it had to do with distance. It will be the Montreal circuit is still, actually the laps themselves, each lap is 12.3 kilometers. That's not changed from last year. The elevation is 269 meters, but the riders will be doing that lap 17 times, not 18.
Well, I bet you the Conti guys and the Canadian national team are happy about that. One less lap of suffering. I mean, it's something.
I think you might be onto something, because Joseph Lemar said that one of the hopes with this change is that the racing will be, let's say, a smidge more dynamic, less attritional, let's say, less just grinding the tar out of these riders.
Yeah, it definitely is pretty dramatic in the last couple laps, right?
It is, and it kind of falls to bits, and maybe they're hoping there'll be more people vying for the win. We'll see if a change of just one lap can have that effect. Have you seen some of the names on the start list, which is not really all that filled out, but there's a few names. Have you seen them there?
A couple names seem familiar. Tom Pidcock, he's some British cyclist. I guess he's relatively good.
Well, we'll see how he does on the skinny tires. He was just third. I believe it was third in the World Championship race on mountain bikes, cross-country Olympic.
There's a Slovenian fellow, Tadej Pogačar.
Oh, come on. Stop being so thick. Yes, Tadej Pogačar.
One of the greatest cyclists alive will be there. And Julian Alaphilippe, who's also kind of getting a bit of a resurgence this year. So, I mean, that's just right there. Those are some big names racing. So, yeah, it should be. And what's neat is Pogačar is also using this as a lead up for his Triple Crown bid. So, yeah, it should be some good stuff.
Pogačar won in Montreal when he was there in 2022. That was his first time racing in Montreal, and then in Quebec the 2 days before that. Also returning is Biniam Girmay. he was third in Quebec in 2022. And I think it's the Quebec course that does suit him better because he can get over the lumps and then he has that wicked fast finish. So, oh, and speaking of Quebec and people who've done quite well there, last year's winner, Arnaud Delis, is set to return. Michael Matthews, a perennial favorite at these races. He's been on so many Quebec City podiums. It's ridiculous. And he is one of only two riders who won both races in the same year. In 2018, he won Quebec and Montreal. The other rider to do that is Simon Gerrans. I guess it's only Australians who do this.
That's the rule. That's generally the rule, yeah. Only Australians are allowed to.
There are others who have won both races, but I believe 99% sure those are the only two who have done it in a single year, back to back. Who else is on this list? Yes, the Canucks. So Pidcock is making his debut at these races, as well as his teammate, Michael Leonard. He is a young rider from the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, and he was snapped up by Ineos. This is his second year on the team. And it'll be cool to see. It'll be cool to see both of them, but I'm hoping to speak for sure with Michael Leonard ahead of those races.
Yeah, for sure. It was great to ride at Avenir where he was up there. And then he had one day where he wasn't up there, but he had definitely wore the yellow jersey after the opening prologue, which was pretty great.
Exactly. And other Canadians who are set to line up are Derek G, of course, Hugo Houle, and Guillaume Boivin. Michael Woods, I guess he's resting on his Vuelta laurels. No, I'm kidding. He had said to me earlier in the year that he'd hoped to fly back right after the Vuelta and do the Quebec races, but that doesn't seem to be happening. He's not. He hasn't been announced. Let's say. I don't really blame him. Another person to look out for, I would say, is Matteo Jorgensen, winner of Paris-Nice this year, and Dvars Door Vlaanderen. He's got that mix of like GC abilities as well as one day classic skills that could come into play. Maybe more in the Montreal race, I think. But
I think you're right.
We'll see. That start list should be filling up quickly. We're speaking a bit early on in the process. So yeah, we expect more names to pop up very soon. Oh yeah, Matej Mohoric is always a fun rider to keep an eye on. He's slated to return. I'm stoked. I will be there. You will be. We'll both be covering it. Everybody, tune in to our social media channels, our website. We will be keeping you up to date with all the action at those World Tour races. And that's the episode. It was written and edited by me, Matthew Pioro. I had help from Matt Hansen. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome, as always.
Thanks also to mountain bike editor Terry McCall. This episode of the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast is produced by Adam Killick. He does all the music too. Thank you, Adam. Also, thanks to Ontario Creates for its support. All right, bud, you better rest up. We're back to school. We're back to work. It's full gas, as they say.
Pretty soon it's gonna be cyclocross, and then the homegrowns are gonna be doing that. Oh, probably. I mean, just take a break.
Maybe you could message the homegrowns and say like, I kind of want this Friday off. Could you guys just phone it in, please?
Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea. I mean, they're gonna run out of closet space at this rate.
Oh, with all the trophies and jerseys, and I'm sure they'll manage. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. Please rate and review the show. Oh, and head over to our website and sign up for our members area. There is exclusive content in there, and it really helps support everything that we do, from the magazine, the website, the podcast. It's all connected, and your support really helps us to bring all this stuff to you. So thanks, everyone, for listening, reading, engaging. Ride safely, and we'll talk to you later.